We are live. Hello, everybody. Welcome to another episode of the 2K Weekly Podcast. This is week 4, entering week 5 of the 2023 season. I'm your host, Type A Joy 101, joined once again by Danny V and Pig Bear. I'm sorry if my voice doesn't sound as alive as it typically does. I just got home from a Detroit Lions game, and my voice is therefore shot. I'll try my best today, but what are you going to do? Anyway, we have plenty of highlights to go over here, and Danny V will start us off with his headlines this week. All right. We have a shorter show today, so do either of you have something interesting that happened to you this week that we can share? Keeping it family friendly. Congratulations. All right, let's get on with it, starting with our Week 4 scores, beginning in Winston-Salem in North Carolina. The Wake Forest Demon Deacons riding off the high with a win over Florida State, taking on the Oklahoma State Cowboys this week, and unfortunately they weren't going to repeat that result. The Cowboys remain number one with an easy win, 47-19 on the road. Oklahoma State's still 4-0 as they'll enter conference play coming up. As for Wake Forest, they fall to 1-3. Their next game on the road is Virginia Tech. Things are not looking good for the Demon Deacons in the short-term future. Danny? And Pig Bear? All right, from Winston-Salem over west to Nashville, we head to Tennessee, where a much closer game between a ranked and unranked team. Number 19, Florida, heading on the road to take on Vanderbilt, the Gators' first conference game of the year, with a bunch of in-state rivals. The Gators play plenty of conference games early. It's actually their second of the year, rather. They beat Ole Miss last week. But it was Vanderbilt who gets an upset win to improve to 3-1 to start the year with a 1-0 conference record, 27-24 with the final in this one. The Commodores get Dave's show this week, following up that Florida, after their loss, will head on the road to take on Tennessee. Danny? And Pig Bear? All right. We'll head now to Madison, Wisconsin. The Badgers hosting the Pitt Panthers. These two teams played each other last year in Toronto for the International Bowl, and Wisconsin got the better of the Pitt Panthers, this time in 3 overtimes. Another overtime game for the Badgers, but it's Whiskey who escapes 42-34 at home. The Badgers now improve after their loss to UCLA, now to 3-1 on the season. They'll take on Ohio State on the road in Week 5. As for the Pittsburgh Panthers, in a wide-open Big East, starting 2-2 is not the end of the world. They'll have a bye next week, but Week 6 they head on the road to take on UConn. Danny? Pig Bear? We now head to Lynchburg, Virginia. Liberty off to an extremely impressive start to the season. I mentioned this on the stream last night, but with a win over USF 17-13 at home, they improved to 3-1 on the year. Their next game is a conference matchup at home against Tulsa in Week 5. They played UCF in Week 3. That's their only loss in conference play. As for USF, they've had a tough stretch after an overtime win over FAU. They fall to 1-3 as they'll host Cincinnati at home coming up. Danny? Things are not going to be easy. I heard Pig Bear leave there. I'm going to move on here to an SEC matchup. The LSU Tigers, number 3 in the nation. They are riding high off that 2KU weekly win over Clemson. However, Texas came into town and had other plans in a tight game. The Texas Longhorns capture their second win of the year, 27-20, repaying the favor that UTSA had in a home upset loss and giving it to LSU. They're now 2-2 on the season, entering conference play. They'll start in Week 6 with the Red River rivalry against Oklahoma. As for the SEC's LSU, it's likely the best chance the conference had at a national championship may or may not have slipped out of their hands there. And it's not going to get easier for the Tigers here. Their next game on the road at Georgia. That's going to be a nightmare for them. Danny? Up next, we have a ranked matchup. Down in Fort Worth, Texas, the TCU Horned Frogs welcoming the Tar Heels, number 17 in the country, North Carolina, into Fort Worth. The Horned Frogs got out to an early lead, and while it got withered away, they kept their distance. 27-13 the final. TCU remaining unbeaten and perhaps a favorite to win the Mountain West. Looking back at the ACC with North Carolina's loss, they now fall on the year to 2-2. Their other loss coming to fellow top 10 team in Georgia Tech. The season is far from over, though. They have a game against Maryland before their Week 6 matchup with Va Tech. As for the TCU Horned Frogs, they are favored throughout the majority of their season going forward. They've survived what may or may not be the toughest stretch of their season with SMU, Utah, Houston, and North Carolina. They have a tough challenge on Week 6 at BYU. They play UNLV at home in Week 5, but that Week 12 matchup and that Week 13 are highlighted in bold. Boise State and Baylor is how they close their season. Danny? All right, we're going to move on here. New Mexico State hosting Texas State in a surprising matchup in the WAC. Both of these teams were two of the top teams in the conference at this point. New Mexico State's one loss in Week 0 against Northern Illinois was on stream, and they've now rattled off 3 straight with a double overtime win over the Bobcats. As for Texas State, that's their second loss of the season, their first coming at Texas. They get Louisiana Lafayette next week. Their next big test will likely be their matchup in Week 10 at the Kibbe Dome against Idaho. As for New Mexico State's season going forward, they get Louisiana Tech on the road. La Tech has not lost this season. They also have a tough matchup to close against the reigning WAC champions in the Idaho Vandals. The most interesting matchup still coming up for the Aggies is UTSA, though. That'll be in Las Cruces for Week 11. Danny? As now we move on The number 6 Stanford Cardinal taking on Oregon State, whose bad start is only getting worse. Not only do they get shut out on the road against the top 10 team, they lose 79-0 in that matchup. Get this, Danny. This is the first time, or this is the highest score ever put out in a shutout against an FBS team since the FBS was ever made back in 1978. No team had ever scored more than 73 points against a fellow FBS member. That dates back to a game in 2003 between Alabama and Troy State. Danny? And looking at their futures coming up, Oregon State gets USC. Arizona State. 2 weeks later, they get Washington State and UCLA. They end the year, of course, at Oregon, a team hungry for revenge after having their Pac-10 championship chances dashed in the last second by the Beavers last season. As for Stanford, they improved to 4-0. They get UCLA next week. And then that Week 8 matchup against Oregon, be careful there. Even Week 10 against Arizona State could be a bit of a challenge. I actually have what looks to be a pretty interesting stretch to end the year. We'll move now on to BYU and Hawaii out on the West Coast. Oh, then it's the Cougars who improved to 4-0. Well, with an impressive resume so far. They had wins over Kansas State, Miami, Arizona, and now the Rainbow Warriors on the road, 44-38 the final. As Stanford, our previous team, can attest, Hawaii, not an easy place to play. Now, BYU has a bye this week. They'll take on TCU at home in Week 6. That might be a potential spot for our stream next week. As for the Rainbow Warriors, Hawaii is now sitting at 2-2 with the losses to BYU and Stanford. They get Long Beach on the road next week. And looking at their season going forward, it shouldn't be that challenging up until a stretch with Week 10 and 11 against Nevada and San Jose State. Danny? I would not, and for people writing off Hawaii, I wouldn't exactly throw their name out of contention yet in the WAC. They're not as explosive as they usually start, but if they get a run going, they could still compete for a WAC title. Before we move on to our top 25, we'll take a brief moment to talk about the game that happened on stream last night. Number 11, UCF, improving to 4-0 with a 30-14 win over Louisville in Cardinal Stadium. What were your takeaways from this game, Danny? What this UCF team reminds me of more so than anything we see today is of the 2012 USF squad in 2KU that made the national championship. They're the one team in the Conference USA to do that. And they lost that title to Oregon. But still, the Conference USA would love to send out Louisville, UCF, Cincy, or USF in some sort of blaze of glory, as well as other teams like Houston, SMU, who are leaving. And I think this UCF team might be destined for greatness coming soon. We'll move on now to our move on now. Actually, before we talk about our top 25, I'll give a brief glimpse over of the current conference standings as of now. We're going to start with the We're going to start with the fledgling American Conference and work our way down. Looking at our conference standings, Jacksonville State is on the top of the American. The conference hasn't played games yet, but they're the only team still unbeaten at 4-0, followed by Charlotte, Eastern Kentucky, and Kennesaw, who are all 2-2. Austin Peay and Tarleton have still yet to win games. In the Big East North Division, Boston College is in firm control. UConn and Syracuse have recovered. They are 2-2 with 1 win each in conference, though Boston College carving out a major lead, having played 3 of its first 4 games in conference. In the South, it is Pitt's right now with 2 wins in conference. They're 2-2. The best record still goes to Georgetown, who's 3-1. The Hoyas are 1-1 in conference play. West Virginia is also unbeaten with their win over Temple. Rutgers is 2-2 as well. They're 1-1 within conference play. Temple and Villanova are 1-3 and 0-2. The Big Ten in their first season without divisions. It's Notre Dame, who's the only team to play a conference game so far. Their win over Iowa. The Fighting Irish are 3-1. The only undefeated team in the Big Ten is actually Penn State. However, they've got plenty of 3-1s. Indiana, Purdue, Wisconsin, Michigan, Michigan State, Minnesota, Illinois, and Iowa are all 3-1, with Northwestern and Ohio State starting 2-2. The Big 12. Also without divisions this season. They'll return in 2024. They have considerably more teams unbeaten. Baylor is the only one who's played a conference game so far with their win over Nebraska. They have the lead at 4-0. Also undefeated, Colorado and Oklahoma State. Kansas, Oklahoma, Kansas State and Nebraska are all 3-1. And the rest of the conference is at 2-2. The Conference USA, as we mentioned, the East is incredibly tight. UCF now 2-0 in conference play. Liberty 3-1 and 1-1 in conference play. The Knights are 4-0, as is Cincinnati, who's yet to play in conference. UAB is 3-1, as is Louisville. USF and East Carolina both are 0-3, or both are 1-3. The West is not as tightly knit. SMU begins our list. They lead 3-1 and they're 1-0 in conference. Meanwhile, Houston and Arkansas are still both 2-2. Southern Miss is at 1-3. The rest of the division is at 0-4, with Tulsa having a conference loss. Quickly glancing at our independents, Army and Dave Show are both 3-1. Colgate has started 2-2. Navy and Holy Cross both have 1 win each. In the Ivy League, things have not been great. The current leaders are Brown and Dartmouth, both at 2-2. Columbia is 1-3, as is everything else going down. Princeton is 0-4. In the MAC, looking at the MAC East, Kent State has the lead at 3-1 with a conference win. Buffalo is 2-2 at 500 in conference. Akron is 3-1 as well, as is Youngstown State. Scrolling down to the West, Eastern Michigan's 1 win was in conference. They hold the lead for now, but at 3-1 are both Northern Illinois and, of all teams, Ball State. The rest of the division is at 2-2, including a dangerous Central Michigan team. In the Missouri Valley, the newly crowned East Division of the Missouri Valley, Southern Illinois is 3-1 to start off the year. Illinois State is at 2-2. The rest of the division is at 1 win each, and Missouri State and Drake have yet to win. In the West Division, North Dakota State and South Dakota State are both 3-1, with Northern Iowa sitting at 2-2. The rest of the division is 1 win or fewer. From the Missouri Valley, we go to the Mountain West. At 11, they'll be 12 in 2024. New Mexico is 4-0, as is San Diego State, Utah, BYU, and Boise State. Utah State and TCU are both 3-1. Going down, UNLV is 2-2, as is Wyoming. Air Force has yet to win a game in conference or otherwise. They have 2 losses in conference, rather. In the Pac-10, they'll be the Pac-12 next season with San Diego State and Utah. Both Arizona State and Stanford are 4-0. Oregon is 3-1 with a win in conference. The Pac-10 is the only conference that has fully started conference play so far, so we'll get a gauge of how everyone is. UCLA's 2 losses were in conference, though they are 2-2. USC is 3-1, splitting 2 conference games. Washington State has had an incredibly impressive run to begin the year at 3-1. Looking to the SEC East, Florida still holds the lead, even with their loss to Vanderbilt, but Georgia Tech is also 3-1 with a conference win. Vanderbilt is there as well at 3-1 and 1-0. Georgia has yet to play a conference game. They will play one next week against LSU. And Tennessee and Kentucky are both sitting at 1-3. How about this? Now with LSU's loss, the one team remaining in the SEC to be undefeated is Mississippi State, who got 4 straight wins. They beat Louisiana Monroe last week. They play a road game against Alabama this week. The Crimson Tide are ineligible for the SEC championship this year, though they are 3-1, as are LSU, Auburn. LSU and Auburn. Tulane is 2-2, as is Ole Miss. The SoCon here, I'm sure Pig Bear would love to hear this. Currently on top of the SoCon North is Old Dominion, still undefeated at 4-0. Washington and Lee is 3-1, an incredibly impressive start. William & Mary, however, is performing as we expected. They are 3-1 on the year. James Madison is 2-2, followed by VMI at 1-3, and Richmond at 0-4. In the SoCon's South Division, which sounds a little redundant, Appalachian State is 4-0. Georgia Southern is sitting at 2-2, as is Western Carolina. The Citadel, Chattanooga, and Furman are all 1-3. Into the Southland we go. The Southland East is led by Stephen F. Austin, 2-2 with a conference win. Also sharing that 2-2 record are Southeast Louisiana, Nichols, West, and Northwestern State. Central Arkansas, Lamar, and McNeese are all behind them. On the other side, Sam Houston State is 4-0. Behind them are Hardin Simmons and Abilene Christian, who have both started 2-2, with 1-3s going to West Texas, Houston Christian, and Incarnate Word, Texas Arlington is 0-4. As we now go to the Sun Belt, Coastal Carolina is unbeaten. They have 4 wins, 2 of which come in conference. FAU is 3-1, and at 2-2 is Western Kentucky, with 3-1-3 teams, FIU, Middle Tennessee, and Georgia State having a conference loss. Arkansas State is unbeaten this far into the season, which is pretty impressive. They sit at 4-0. South Alabama is 3-1, one of their best starts of the season since joining the FBS. Troy, Louisiana, and Louisiana Monroe are all 1-4, with North Texas having a bye this week, sitting at 1-2 with a conference loss. And finally, we head to the WAC. Going to be one of the most fun WACs we'll ever see. Louisiana Tech and UTSA are both undefeated. New Mexico State is 3-1. The rest of the division is 2-2. Cullen Payton, Idaho, UTEP, Texas State. It's really anybody's game here. As for the Pacific Division, we have 3 3-1 teams, rather 4. Nevada, San Jose State, and CSU Fullerton are all 3-1, as is Pacific. Hawaii, Fresno State, and Long Beach State are all 2-2. Any thoughts about the conferences, Danny? Pig Bear? We'll take a look now at our top 25. We're going to go from the top 5 and work our way down as usual. We actually do have quite a bit of shakeup in the top 5 with LSU and USC both losing. And this top 25 may or may not reminisce, bring back memories of 2021. We start with Oklahoma State, of course, remaining number 1. Virginia Tech remains number 2 as well. And Boise State actually bumps up from number 4 to number 3. And this will actually bring a pretty neat little thing, because we have the 2020 champion in Virginia Tech, the 2022 champion in Boise State, and now the 2021 champion in Stanford at number 4. Jumping up. And at number 5, the 2021 runner-ups, hoping to be the 2023 champions. Number 5 is Baylor. Moving down, number 6 is TCU, jumping 4 spots. Number 7 is Colorado. Number 8, Georgia Tech, bumping up with LSU falling to number 9. And for the first time in school history, UCF is now in the top 10. Jumping up to number 11 and 12 is Oregon and Michigan, respectively. Number 13 is Utah, hopping ahead of the falling number 14, USC. Is sitting at number 15 is Michigan State. Number 16 is Georgia. The Georgia Bulldogs sit ahead of number 17, Clemson. Number 18 is Coastal Carolina, continuing to climb up the ladder. Number 19, San Diego State. And number 20 is Penn State. Now we get to some new teams coming in. Returning to the top 25 is Auburn, sitting at number 21. Number 22 is Boston College, who survived the guillotine last week and kept themselves in the top 25 this week. Number 23, North Carolina, falling after the loss to TCU. Number 24 is Illinois. The Illini will have an interesting matchup against Penn State. And now in the top 25, for the first time since 2021, is Cincinnati. The Bearcats are 4-0 and sit number 2 on the Conference USA's power rankings. Danny, your thoughts on this top 25? Pig Bear? A lot of Southern love here. They lost to TCU. The one team not here is South Carolina, of course. The other teams receiving votes: Northern Illinois, Louisville, Arizona State, Florida, Mississippi State, UTSA, New Mexico State, and San Jose State. We'll now move on to our matchups for Week 5. We have lines given to us, of course, by Pig Bear. And I'm going to actually let Danny start by reading us into this one. Looking at this matchup, it's hard to pick against Virginia Tech, and I'm not going to do that here. I'm going to take the Hokies in a blowout. Danny? Pig Bear? And now move on to College Station. The Texas A&M Aggies are 2-2 as they'll take on their first conference opponent this week against number 7, Colorado. The Buffaloes are favored by 4.5 in this matchup. Though I'm actually going to be a bit controversial here in picking the Aggies. I've not liked what I've seen from Colorado so far this season. Something about how they played against Drake last week has thrown me off on this team. And in a hostile environment like College Station, this might be a potential upset alert. Danny? Pig Bear? Let's head to our first matchup in the Commander-in-Chief's trophy cycle in Air Force Academy of Colorado. The Air Force Falcons are 0-4 on the year. They'll be hosting the 1-3 Navy Midshipmen. Navy is favored by 7, though Air Force won this matchup last year, 16-6. I'm actually going to take Air Force to win their first game of the year at home here. Danny? Pig Bear? All right, I guess I'm in the minority there. We have a ranked matchup from Champaign, Illinois. Is 3-1 on the year, hoping to rebound from a sluggish start to the season. They'll take on number 20, the 4-0 Penn State Nittany Lions. The Illini are favored by 2.5. They played last season, Illinois winning 16-7 in this matchup. But I'm going to pick the Nittany Lions to get it done here on the road and put Illinois back in their place here. Danny? Pig Bear? All right, now we hand it down to Danny for the Dave Show breakdown. And who are you picking? All right. I'll save my pick for last. Pig Bear, who are you taking? It would be an upset, I would think. Someone write that down. We should probably get that soundboard in here. Don't forget to join the Type A Joey 101 Discord server linked on the channel's About page. I'm taking Vanderbilt in this one. I was really impressed how they played against the Florida Gators here. And Dave Show's surely going to put up some fight, but I think Vanderbilt gets just enough edge to get off to their first 4-1 start in almost 20 years. Give me the Commodores. We're going to move on now to some ACC matchups. Maryland is 1-3 to start the year. They're heading on the road to take on a number 23 North Carolina. UNC is favored by 12 in this matchup. They haven't played since 2021. The Tar Heels winning 17-10. I'm going to take another Tar Heels victory here. They stay off the chopping block of the top 25, and they keep up with the Joneses of their conference once more. Danny? Pig Bear? Mm-hmm. All right. A game that spells danger for any number 1 team on the road at Iowa State. You might scoff at that, but that has historically been a pretty dangerous place for a top team to play. The number 1 Oklahoma State Cowboys are heading to Ames, Iowa to take on the Cyclones. Oklahoma State favored by 17.5. Last year, Oklahoma State won in Ames, won this game 34-24. I think that this spread is probably not going to be passed. I think it's going to be a little closer than the experts think. Iowa State off to a pretty decent start for them, but give me the Cowboys to remain unbeaten. Danny? Pig Bear? Keep an eye out for a cyclone warning in that one. A future Big East matchup here as number 25 Cincinnati heads to Tampa to take on the USF Bulls. Cincinnati favored by 7.5 in this matchup. The 4-0 Bearcats taking on a 1-3 Bulls team. Last time USF actually won this matchup 38-20 in a really down year for the Cincinnati Bearcats. But I think Cincy pulls it off here and improves to 5-0. That matchup against USF, or that matchup against the UCF much later in the year is going to be very interesting, Danny. Good reference there. Pig Bear? Upset at home. Our next game here is a conference matchup, once again from the ACC. Florida State taking on Clemson, a very historically significant ACC matchup. Two of the most successful programs in ACC history. The Tigers are favored at home by 2.5. The 3-1 squad is playing their first conference game here. Florida State's 2-2 with both a win and a loss in conference. Last time they played, Florida State won the matchup 28-23. Give me the Tigers to more than cover in this one. Danny? Pig Bear? Do you think it's not going to be a shocker here? All right. It's not over yet. They're one loss on the year coming against LSU. We're going to talk about LSU in a bit. Michigan State is number 15 in the country. They're 3-1. You know who else is 3-1? A very scrappy Indiana team who will be hosting the Spartans in Bloomington. And Indiana won the last matchup between these two in 2021, 31-27. Evan, this rivalry, one of the more underrated in college football, the battle for the bronze spittoon. Michigan State is favored in this matchup by 2.5. I'm going to be bold. I'm going to be brash. I'm going to pick the Hoosiers to improve to 4-1 and maybe return to the top 25 once again. Danny? Pig Bear? Oh, they are. They're totally. Rutgers won. All right, we're all picking the upset here. Speaking of upsets, one of the biggest upsets of last season was Notre Dame going into a top-ranked Michigan's home turf and taking down the Wolverines. Now, Michigan is ranked once again. They're 3-1 and number 12 in the nation to taking on Notre Dame in South Bend. The last time these two teams played, Notre Dame won 24-17, as I mentioned. Notre Dame will come out in the Shamrock green jerseys for this one. Michigan wearing their throwbacks this week. It's going to be a very exciting matchup in South Bend. The spread is even. Both teams are 3-1. This is their first conference game for Michigan. Notre Dame has a conference win, though, last week over Iowa. I think the spread is I think I wouldn't call the spread even. I would give Michigan the slight favor, the slight edge here, and I think Michigan does use that slight edge to win this game. Danny? Now, with you knowing who I am, I can't let that slide. I can't just let that slide here. I can't let the disrespect slide here. But Pig Bear, what are you saying? Mm-hmm. I see how it is. So I respect your team, and you don't respect mine. All right. You see how you see how powerful you can be if you make your own universe. How about we wrap up with a West Coast game, some Pac-10 after dark, number 11 Oregon, favored by 4, hosting Washington State, who's had an impressive start to the season. They're 3-1, as are the Ducks. Oregon won the last matchup in Pullman last year, 55-9. I don't think it's going to be as much of a blowout here, but Oregon wins this game handily. Danny? By 5, according to the honks there. Pig Bear? It's got nothing. There you go. We're all picking the Ducks here. That Washington State team is going to be very interesting going forward. I think this might be the best Cougar team we've seen in ages. But now we move from the West Coast to our game of the week. Now, 2 weeks ago, LSU hosted a 2KU Saturday's game. They beat Clemson. They have since lost to Texas. They're now 3-1. They're now heading on the road for our 2KU game of the week to number 16 Georgia. The Bulldogs are 3-1 on the season, with their one loss coming to last week's host, Louisville. It's going to be a very interesting cycle there. The Bulldogs are favored in this matchup, actually. According to the line here, by a point. It's going to be a very interesting, very closely knit, exciting game. I'm going to be picking Georgia to win here and keep the East ahead of the West in the SEC. Danny? Because if there's anything Georgia needs, it's another universe where they're successful. Pig Bear, what are your thoughts? Yeah. All right. I think, of course, LSU, the two-time reigning SEC champions, 2021 and 22, they're trying to three-peat. A three-peat has never been done since the 1970s in the SEC. That was when Alabama won it in 73, 74, and 75. Georgia hasn't had to wait that long since their last title. Their last SEC title's back in 2019. But they've been as hungry as anyone to get back to the pinnacle. And this is the first step on that road. Don't forget to tune in Saturday night for another 2KU Saturdays matchup as LSU takes on Georgia. Thank you for watching tonight's stream. Hopefully I'll be in better condition for that than I was tonight. But thank you all for watching, and so long from the 2KU.